What's going on, everyone? This is GC Murray, the Executive Director and General Counsel of iSERF, and I am so excited to debut and host our inaugural episode of Beyond the Scope. Now, this is not like your normal webinars. This is allowing us to get up close and personal with some of the best endoscopic spine surgeons in the world. And so, who is our first guest? None other than our Vice President, Dr. John Ogunlade. So we're going to take a quick little break, and then we're going to bring Dr. John to the stage, and we'll go from there. Thanks for being here.
We welcome Dr. John Ogunlade. Dr. Ogunlade is an assistant professor at Washington University in St. Louis and is the inaugural vice president of iSERF. As the director of WashU's endoscopic spine surgery program, he has swiftly established the largest endoscopic spine surgery program in the Midwest over the last year. Dr. Ogunlade completed his neurosurgery residency training at Riverside University Health Systems Medical Center and completed a fellowship in endoscopic and complex spine surgery at the University of Washington in Seattle. Since his appointment at Washington University in St. Louis, Dr. Ogunlade has trained residents, fellows, and other attending surgeons advanced techniques in endoscopic spine surgery. His active participation in the Endoscopic Spine Research Group reflects his dedication to pushing the boundaries of endoscopic spine surgery and enhancing patient outcomes.
Dr. O, welcome to the stage. Thank you for being our inaugural guest.
Thanks for having me, GC.
All right, so you and I go way back, and we had a entire montage about your successes and kind of your bio. But I want you to have the opportunity to tell the people exactly how you got into medicine in general.
Yeah, growing up in South Florida, I always had this desire to help people. It's something that my family, has done through church and through just the community setting and a long kind of drawn out process of just learning how to be helpful to people. And I would say that when it came to medicine, initially it was my thought that I would, do something in computers, but overall I realized that helping people gave me a better sense of purpose and a greater, sense of accomplishment. And that's how I got into medicine. Not anyone in my family had any, no one in my family had any, medical history or background. And for me, it was a very long, kind of drawn out process of understanding what it took to become a doctor, much less a neurosurgeon. So for me, the journey of becoming a physician was one where I kind of, found all the different individual roads and ways on my own, and essentially asked for help along the way from different mentors. And little by little, working my way up that mountain, I kind of got to the point where I finally achieved the success of being a neurosurgeon, and from there it's just been no looking back ever since.
That's incredible. But I'm curious though, neurosurgery being the field that it is, what exactly first sparked your interest in spine surgery? And more specifically, based on, your long history, what really got you into endoscopic techniques?
Yeah, when it comes to my interest in spine surgery, honestly, it didn't start until my fourth year of my residency. I had a chief resident who pretty much told me as a fourth year, "Hey, John, you've got great hands. You're going to make a great neurosurgeon, but you really have a good understanding of spine biomechanics, and you do a lot of great surgery as a PGY4." And he kind of encouraged me to consider doing spine surgery. So that being said, I kind of started having this idea in my head that maybe I should consider spine surgery. Maybe I should try understanding the mechanics of and biomechanics of spine surgery. And that then sparked the interest. And as I started to see more and more patients from the lens of a spine surgeon and seeing their improvement with interventions, I really found myself kind of enamored by it. Fast forward to the chief year, literally right before COVID, interviewing for spine programs as far as which program I was going to do a fellowship in. I met Dr. Hofstetter, who is one of my mentors in spine surgery, and at that time he had just created the first ever full endoscopic spine surgery atlas, I was reading this book and I became really excited about endoscopic spine surgery because it was the least invasive surgical technique available. Um, and then I would say, to kind of round things out, when I got into my fellowship with Dr. Hofstetter in Seattle, that was the first time I actually saw the technique, and then, but also the impact it had on patients in the recovery. And that's what really cemented it for me that this was what I was going to devote my career to, being an endoscopic spine surgeon, is seeing patients get better with less invasive surgery.
So would you say that that was the moment that it crystallized to you that endoscopic surgical techniques was going to be a defining part of your career?
Absolutely. I mean, I can even remember the case. We did an endoscopic unilateral laminectomy for bowel decompression, or ULBD. This patient had severe foraminal and central canal stenosis, so essentially stenosis in the spine, lumbar spine, causing essentially neurogenic claudication with symptoms of cramping and burning in the legs when he walked. And I remember the day of surgery, we did the surgery. As soon as the patient woke up, he said his back pain felt better and he felt like his legs felt different. And so then, fast forward, a couple of weeks, I'm seeing him in our clinic for a follow-up visit. And he's telling me how he's gone back to this great life of walking around Lake Union, which is a famous, very known, well-known lake in Seattle, and that he felt like he was now be able to go back to do the things he enjoyed, which really cemented it to me that, this is something that if I, adopt the techniques, learn them very well, I can hopefully give patients in whatever community I practice in the same kind of results.
Now you talk about, deciding whether or not you're going to adopt those surgical techniques, but endoscopic spine surgery is still kind of gaining traction globally despite being around for so long. What have been some of the most rewarding and challenging parts of being an early adopter and early advocate like you have been?
Yeah, I think one of the most rewarding things is being able to, you know, help change the landscape in which it exists in the United States. I mean, globally, endoscopic spine surgery is almost like a standard of care, where it's the first surgery that most patients get, and maybe even the only surgery that some patients get. Whereas in the United States, there's been, a lot of pushback in the surgical technique for whatever reason. And I don't want to get into the details of that, during this conversation. But I think overall, being one of the first or early adopters in endoscopic spine surgery, because we're still in the early adoption phase, the value is you get to help shape the landscape. You get to help tell the narrative of how it affects, patients, and help them have a quicker recovery in a lot of instances. Um, as far as the second part of that question, uh, the challenges really is getting institutions and insurance providers to understand the value it brings to patients, not simply because it's more surgery or less surgery, but just because it helps improve overall quality of life for a lot of patients who have been deemed non-surgical. So when you think about traditional surgery, usually it's, you have to have a certain kind of height and weight body mass index. Usually patients who are very large or in a very large morbidly obese kind of setting, they're not really the best surgical candidates for surgery, because surgery leads to bigger complications. It leads to longer surgeries, bigger incisions, higher risk of infection, and overall, for those patients, a lot of the surgical complications are related to their just general body habitus. Whereas with endoscopic spine surgery, whether you're a very large patient or a very small patient, the surgical, um, you know, um, incision is exactly the same, and the surgery technique is the same. So endoscopic spine surgery allows you to offer surgery and decompression surgery to patients who may, with open surgery, be a very challenging case. But with endoscopic spine surgery, it's pretty much the same surgery. Then if you extrapolate that to older patients, to patients who don't want general anesthesia, to patients who are extremely sick, all of a sudden you start to recognize that you can apply this same surgical technique with maybe, older patients who may not want anesthesia by doing their surgeries awake. And all of a sudden you've now opened up a surgical intervention to people who were initially either one, against it, or two, just not great surgical candidates for whatever reason initially. So for me, I think that's the beauty of it, right? You can still help people even though they may not be a good candidate for traditional surgery.
And I must say, as the executive director of iSERF, I have had the absolute privilege of being able to amass a lot of the information regarding, patients and how they feel after their endoscopic procedures, and it has been amazing. Now, God forbid I ever have to need, any kind of spinal surgery, but it just seems like the results that every single person that's been posting uh, about have been miraculous. People are going in feeling one way and literally leaving that day being able to walk and exclaiming how much better they feel than they've ever felt in the last, insert amount of years. So it's been an incredible thing to learn about. But let's talk a little bit more about iSurf. And how did you first become involved with the creation of the foundation as one of its inaugural founders?
Yeah, I would say there's a group of surgeons, both orthopedic and neurosurgeons, who at every conference, whether it's international or nationally within the United States, they're the ones presenting and giving the latest and greatest information on endoscopic spine surgery. They're the ones doing the, leading research in endoscopic spine surgery. And honestly, it's one of our pleasures to come together as a community of surgeons and talk about results, outcomes, surgical techniques. And as we thought about it, there was no formal place for us to have that community outside of these international meetings or these meetings where we have these courses that are held by some other entity. So it really became apparent to us that we need to create that community so that not only our individual surgeons from across the country, can get together and collaborate and improve and push the field of endoscopic spine surgery forward. But people who are interested, they needed to know where could they go to, become a part of that community, and that's why iSurf was created. I would say that for me, it was a no-brainer. I hate to use that pun, because I'm a neurosurgeon, but I think the reality of it is community is what helps shapes outcomes, is what helps shapes improvement, is what helps improves our education and research. And without that foundational community being a part of the conversation of where endoscopic spine surgery goes, not just the United States but in the globe, it really becomes a fractured effort where you have multiple different organizations or even efforts from different individuals trying to push something forward on their own. So the idea of iSurf is that we could create this organization that is global, where endoscopic spine surgeons across the world can join their efforts and move the field of spinal endoscopy forward in a meaningful way, where all members, all people interested, have a seat at the table and can help shape that future.
You talk about the fact that all members could have a seat at the table, and by and large, that is true. But I'm curious, what made you want to step up and take on a leadership role in such a brand new foundation?
It's interesting. I never thought of myself as being the person who would step up and be the leader, but it was apparent to me that if we were going to get iSurf off the ground, take it from just a concept that we talk about every time we meet as a group of surgeons and actually make it a reality, um, there was no one better positioned than myself and our current vice president Sanjay to take on the initiative. And we began looking, for one, advice and not only advice, but also, I would say, counsel and how to make this happen, which is how we got you involved. And I think, the cool thing about it is, as a group of surgeons, we all have this desire to improve things from, not just the standpoint of surgical outcomes, but also for, surgeons' access and availability to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. So taking the idea of iSurf and then merging it with the idea of how do we turn this into a long-standing organization where surgeons are not just the participants, but they're the ones who actually shape the community, the ones who shape the organization, meant that I had to step into that role as a leadership as a leader, and then from there on, kind of set the precedent that this organization is run by surgeons, is for surgeons, and forever in its existence will be for the betterment of endoscopic spine surgery for any surgeon across the globe. So overall, I think, it was really just a summation of all these different ideas finally coming to fruition with having the knowledge of who could help us make this accomplishment happen, who can help us create this organization, and then also how do we make sure that it's sustainable and has a life of its own once I'm no longer in that leadership role.
And you've done a tremendous job. I mean, you
Thank
kick
you.
off the year with the annual board meeting. Then you go right in to the first session with University of South Florida. So you have your first in-person educational seminar there. And then I think just a month or maybe a month and a half later, you guys are in Houston Methodist doing the same thing. And then we just wrapped up the work with Seattle Science Foundation. So first of all, wow. Uh, You guys have been doing an amazing job. You guys have been doing a lot of promoting education within the endoscopic sphere. So I'm curious, what's going to be your primary focus for the rest of 2025 and also the start of 2026?
Yeah, our primary focus right now is for one, continue to grow our membership and show members the value that iSERF brings to them, especially if they're interested in endoscopic spine surgery. But some of our other initiatives outside of our already ongoing research and continuing to support research efforts is more dedicated to residents and fellows, and it's our traveling fellowship, which allows for fellows to travel across the country and see endoscopic spine surgery programs and how they thrive and how they are able to treat patients and learn techniques from some of the leading endoscopic spine surgeons in the field within the United States. Another initiative of ours is our actual dedicated iSERF certified fellowships, which essentially is a year-long fellowship at an iSERF certified institution where you would get a large volume of endoscopic spine surgery cases and are then also able to help and conduct meaningful research that helps push the field of spinal endoscopy forward. And that's in collaboration with some of our groups such as the ESRG, as well as other self-directed institutional research projects. And then one of our big efforts for this year is to have our first ever actual iSERF meeting, our annual meeting, where all of the members and all of the different faculty comes together, has an iSERF course that also is filled with our industry partners, as well as a meeting for our members to meet these leaders in the field of endoscopic spine surgery, and also collaborate in how they could get more involved, improve their own surgical technique, and then also workshops to help them understand how to deal with difficult cases and even improve overall their exposure to helping more patients.
Now, iSurf is the fastest and quickest growing endoscopic spine foundation and society. So I'm curious because one of the biggest things that you all discuss is creating this global community. So how are you all helping build those connections across continents, institutions, and even surgical philosophies?
I think the thing that's easy for iSurf now that it exists is to draw that community, because there are people who have been looking for that. So when it comes to growing our membership and reaching this international cohort of surgeons, it's something that we do because we think it's how we move spinal endoscopy forward. But the reality of it is, it's those surgeons who continue to make iSurf what it is. It's their desire to be involved. It's their input. It's their perspective, and that's what allows iSurf to be such a great organization to be a part of. I think overall, I know we had our first, technically our first annual meeting not too long ago, and we had one surgeon joining from Turkey, and for him, this was something that he has been looking, for and searching for to be a part of. He had been doing spinal endoscopy for the greater part of 6 years, and now there's an organization where he could be not just involved with, as a member, but also help shape the future of what spinal endoscopy looks like in his own country, regionally, as well as globally from a membership standpoint. So I think there are surgeons out there who are already doing spinal endoscopy. The goal of iSERF is to show them that, hey, there's a community and you can be a part of that community to push that field forward, not just in your area, but also globally.
So you take that concept and you create an organization out of it, a 501(c)(3, and then you create a membership model with that where you can have, you have a membership category for residents and fellows, you have a resident category for surgeons of all types, and then you have the Vanguard, which is supposed to be the premier membership category. Um, and so I'm curious though, how do you see this structure kind of shaping the future of member engagement, the future of leadership development, and ultimately the future of surgeon mentorship?
Yeah, I think the idea of a one size fits all doesn't really work for spinal endoscopy, right? There are a lot of people who are very interested in spinal endoscopy but have no idea where to start, where to begin, and may not necessarily see the value in it just yet because, their exposure to spinal endoscopy is limited. For those people, whether they're residents or fellows or, surgeons in their first years of training or in their first years of practice, I should say, there's a membership spot for them where they don't necessarily have to feel the pressure of paying, a large amount for something that they haven't necessarily seen the value in yet. And our goal is to engage them and show them that the community is more than just a couple of faculty members doing these surgeries. The community is much broader in its scope, and it allows for them to connect with other people who are also at the same stage that they are in. So, if you're in your first year of, being an attending spine surgeon, whether it be an orthopedic or neurosurgeon, you're going to find other members exactly where you are. And through that sense of community, you can understand, one, someone else's perspective who are literally in your same shoes, but also see how that, sorry, it looks like my camera died.
If we lost you for a second, Doc.
How's that now?
All right, we got you back.
Perfect. So yeah, so that community of surgeons, it's one where, if we allow ourselves to kind of understand where each individual surgeon is and help them kind of create a community where they can exist and not necessarily feel that they themselves are kind of in a silo, it allows them to grow their understanding of spinal endoscopy, find the things that helps them, improve their practice for their patients, but then also show them that there is a way in which they can grow within that organization to, meet milestones and eventually become a leader in the field and hopefully shape the future of spinal endoscopy globally.
Okay. Fantastic answer, and thank you for sticking with us through the technical difficulties. But I got some rapid fire questions I want to ask you. Just want you to give me your best and quickest answers, right? So we can get
Okay.
everyone and get yourself out of here in our 30-minute timeline. So I'm curious, what's the initiative that you are most excited for in the next 3 to 5 years?
Our traveling fellowship.
Care to expand?
Oh, I thought you said quick rapid fire. Well, yeah, no, I think the traveling fellowship is going to highlight the different endoscopic programs that already exist in the United States that have been up and running for years before iSERF came along. And I think all that's going to do is bring a spotlight to those individual programs. I'm talking about places like the University of Miami, at WashU, University of Washington in Seattle, Vanderbilt, Brown, ESINY. I mean, I can keep going on, University of Wisconsin, University of Utah, Texas back. These are places where endoscopic spine surgery is already happening, is thriving, it's at a large volume. And essentially now, right, iSERF is going to bring individual, fellows to those programs who had no idea what was going on in that region. See how each region is different. See how each institution does endoscopic spine surgery different. And with that, amount of exposure and knowledge for that one individual or several individuals who are doing the traveling fellowship, they can now go back and say, well, how do I want my practice to look like? If I'm going to build an endoscopic program, how do I want my program to look like? And that's the value of the traveling fellowship, is you go around the country, see these different cities, see the different communities that are impacted by spinal problems and conditions, and then see how it's treated with endoscopic spine surgery.
Incredible. All right, we're still in rapid fire, so I'm curious. How do you balance your enthusiasm, your authentic enthusiasm for advancing surgical techniques with the responsibilities of being in a mission-driven organization?
Yeah, I think the reality of it is those two things kind of go hand in hand. In my institution, we are looking to push not just the field of spine surgery, neurosurgery, just in general medicine forward, and that's the initiative of Washington University in St. Louis. And I would say I'm kind of in a unique situation where my department wants me to, further spinal endoscopy because they see the value it brings to our community in St. Louis. So for me, this is a hand in hand. One thing is leading to help improve spinal endoscopy from a community standpoint. The other one is looking to try and take it from a global standpoint and improve it so that more people can have access to it. But overall, I think the balance really is a matter of just staying focused on the goal at hand and tackling each individual task one thing at a time. And with that, I find that I can actually give both my practice and my outside endeavors for iSERF the necessary time to make sure that both are not neglected.
All right, we're still in rapid fire, but we're going to wrap it up with these last two questions. So, in the next 5 years, think about looking ahead into the future of iSerf. In that timeline, what do you consider success?
Yeah, I think success in the next 5 years would be the organization continuing to not just further spinal endoscopy globally, but help shape the way in which research is conducted in a way where now we have global research projects where multiple institutions from across the globe are showing the results and effectiveness of spinal endoscopy. I think another thing that would be considered a success is having a membership group that meets on an annual basis and is enthusiastic about the future of spinal endoscopy and how that's shaping the future of spine surgery. So it's very hard to kind of gauge that degree of success or to measure that degree of success. And it's one that I think it's only realized once it's there. That aha moment happens, and you start to see, okay, this is exactly what we were hoping for. That yeah, this organization, not only is it growing in size and outreach and in scope, but it's doing on its own organically, and that to me would be a great success for this organization.
All right, last rapid fire questions. Who are the next three people that we should make sure that we have on the show beyond the scope?
Okay. Christoph Hofstetter. One, I'm biased, he's my mentor, but I think he is one of the modern day, pioneers of the field of endoscopy, not just in the United States, but I think globally. He has really reshaped how people think about spinal endoscopy. The other is our president, Sanjay Kamkanla. I think he is an amazing surgeon, and he is probably one of the next generational surgeons that will push the field of spinal endoscopy forward, not just from a surgeon's perspective, but also from a business standpoint. So I think he has a lot of great initiatives that should be highlighted. And the last one is one of our premier endoscopic spine surgeons, Peter Derman. I think he also has a very great perspective on not just spinal endoscopy, but how it fits in a larger private practice model. And he has a massive amount of social media influence, which I think is showing how you don't necessarily need to do large surgery to give patients better outcomes. So I would say those are three that I would say is a must. But of course, we have a host of many other surgeons, whether it's, Ray Gardaki, Mark Mahan, whether it's Chol Kim or Dan Park or Greg Basil, all these different surgeons in all these different places in our country who are amazing surgeons who are doing spinal endoscopy and maybe might be doing it behind the scenes and is not well known. But overall, they are pushing the field forward through their work, through their research, and through their actual day-by-day surgical techniques with their individual patients.
All right, and there you have it, folks. Dr. John Ogunlade, Vice President of iSERF. Doc, I want to give you a few moments to kind of give any kind of closing words. I want to yield the floor completely to you. So the floor is yours, Doc. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. And again, I do appreciate everyone's interest in iSurf. I think that this organization has the opportunity to be a global force for good for spinal endoscopy. And what we really need is your support. So if you're interested in joining iSurf, if you're interested in spinal endoscopy, I would say, follow the link below to iSurf.org and join the wave. I think honestly, this is a way for our community to continue to grow and to push the field of spinal endoscopy forward, not just nationally, but globally.